know? So there's the shame. It's like, oh, it's my fault.
It's my fault.
You know, somehow it's my fault.
Hard to read the green. Okay, would you come up and to fix that for me? Greg's going to keep with the mic. I'm like making all kinds of whiteboard decisions. I never do this. Thanks, babe.
Green is not the new black.
Green is not the new black. So we have a tendency to, when we have all kinds of unresolved negative emotions, where does that go, typically? They're unresolved, so that's a clue. Because the resolved ones are resolved. The unresolved ones get pressed down to our subconscious. Because we have to move on, right? We got to function in life, and if they remain unresolved, they get pressed down into a place where we tend to not be consciously aware of them, and then they come out through behaviors that we find embarrassing, uncontrollable, and we don't really know why we act the way we do, and it's because we have unresolved negative emotions pushed down to the subconscious because we think they're not resolvable. So almost inherent in this is a sense of hopelessness, right? This can't be resolved. There's no way that God can answer this, right? Because he would already have done that. And so it gets pressed to a place where it's no longer a part of our conscious awareness, and then it just starts to become a part of the lens, the emotional lens that we view the world with, and that's what we would call like a negative expectation of how people, how things are going to be. And we lose our optimism. We lose our dreaming. We lose our adventurousness. We lose our ability to trust people. We lose our risk-taking. We lose our peace. We find ourselves in new encounters and new situations feeling unrested and unpeaceful because of disappointments. Okay, there was somebody was going to comment. Carrie, were you going to comment? No? I want you to talk again. That's the whole fun of that's the fun of this. If nobody talks and it's just gonna be me, that's not fun. I mean, well, kind of sometimes, but you know. Anyone else want to comment? Yeah, Carrie, thanks. I'm sorry, Adrian. Your wife, Carrie. You're Adrian.
I think it actually goes even a step further, that those unresolved things, they kind of they percolate and fester in our subconscious, and actually, you know, I think they start to affect our belief system, which then starts to affect the way that we behave. And the ultimate result is the things, what we believe and the things that we do result in more of those same disappointments coming into our life. So it's like a vicious circle.
Yep. So I'm kind of super excited about this because this kind of just happened in the moment today, and I feel the Lord's wanting to speak to the areas in my life and areas in our life that are unresolved. And in fact, honey, if you don't mind coming back up, will you pick another color, just put unresolved? That. Use brown. Jocelyn has a sense. She has a color sense. So, because I know that the Lord so loves for us to live from His, like it says, faith is the substance of things, what? Hoped for. So if we have unresolved things that are affecting our very belief system, that then creates the very behavior that's counterproductive to the things we hope for, we find ourselves at odds with faith. We find ourselves at odds with our agreement with God. And I'll say that you guys might not know that I feel like one of the best definitions of faith is really an agreement with God. Because faith isn't believing something that's counter to what God's doing in our lives. So it really kind of, we've in the English language, the word faith has changed. It changed about 80 years ago. And it used to mean, faith used to mean a divine partnership. But it became the word belief. And when that changed about 100 years ago, that definition changed into belief. We thought that faith was now a belief, something that you believe for, something you proclaim, something that you just, well, you can come up with all kinds of beliefs, right? Like, I could believe that I'm going to grow 5 more inches, by the time I'm like 60. I could believe for that, I could proclaim for that, I could, stand for that, but unless God's actually having me grow 5 more inches before I'm 60, it's unlikely that it's going to happen. So that's not faith, that's a belief. People believe in all kinds of things, right? All around the world, people have all kinds of beliefs. But faith, that is the substance of things hoped for, is a divine connection with the Lord himself. And that's a difference. That's the difference. The key difference between believing for something and having faith is an agreement with God. And it can't be divorced from his presence. So when we're looking at these types of issues, we have to go back to a place of conversation with the Lord in his presence. Because really, he has to speak to all of these abandonments, hurts, rejection, shame, hopelessness, the disappointment, how God interacts with me, like that become beliefs, that then become behavior. And by the way, this is a jumbled mixture of things that are usually below our conscious awareness. And so we actually get to choose to allow the Lord to tramp around in our subconscious. Tramp around in all the places and the parts of me that I am not currently aware. I give you permission to walk around in the spaces of my life and heal the hurts that I'm not even aware of. And that's when he does that, that's when we find ourselves suddenly able. Those are the suddenlies. Anybody have a suddenly happen? Right? Where you were suddenly, a shift happened. That's the Holy Spirit moving in and around, right below the surface of our consciousness. And I love that. I love the picture. You guys were just in Israel, and you probably know this better than I do. But of the temple, was such a precious place because it had the outer courts, it had the inner courts, and then it had the Holy of Holies. Are you guys familiar, right, with that kind of like basic structure? That's a really simplistic conversation. But the outer courts were like almost everyone was able to be in the outer courts. Women, men, everyone was allowed to be in the outer courts. But as you went into the inner courts, that was like considered a more sacred space. And things shifted from, in the outer courts, you could hear all the busyness of the street. You could hear all of the activity that was going on. The sunlight was plentiful. But as you moved into the inner courts, it became a little darker. It became like a little quieter. And so all of your senses were like kind of honed in a little bit more. And as you know, as you went into the Holy of Holies, that curtain, right, that tore when Christ died, that curtain that separated that space, in there was actually no light. There was no candlelight. It was totally dark. And the thought was that if you were one of the people who went into the Holy of Holies, which was pretty rare, that God's presence himself would light your way. And so you're moving from these places of, I am totally like involved in the natural world, to an ever-increasing place where it is, where your senses are kind of like activated towards an awareness of God's presence. And I feel like that's so much of the work of the Holy Spirit here. Is that as we start to become aware of, and the Holy Spirit becomes our guide in the spaces of disappointments and past hurts, he starts to speak to the places. So, and Christy, you brought this up beautifully. How God interacts with me. You were disappointed. You were like, I'm done. I'm done with him saying he wants to talk to me all the time, and I don't feel like I hear him, right? I'm done with like trying to pursue that, and now thankfully you decided not to be done, because like now you hear him all the time, and that's super, super awesome. But at that moment in time, that wasn't happening. And then the Lord wanted to say something, which was, you belong. You belong. And that was enough for you to then take all the steps that you took. And that's why I think it's so pivotal that we hear the Lord and that we learn to practice hearing him in all of these places, because it so does shift, thank you, Adrian, what we believe, which completely shifts how we behave. So we're like right on time to now step into our prophetic practice time. So let's do it. And prophetic practice is like, oh, I probably shouldn't even use those words anymore. What it really means is we just practice listening to God. And I do really believe it's a cultivated skill. I think it's that partnership of learning how to be out from the outer courts and moving into the inner courts and then into the place of the Holy Holies where we really hear the Lord actively every day in our lives. Just talking to us, just having conversation, just really speaking to these places and having these issues resolved. So one example recently of the Lord speaking into one of these places is I thought that certain people in my life, that God was doing these healing journeys in their life, and that they were going to be totally like transformed and capable and made able. And so I've stood for that. For some of them, I have stood for many, many years. And you know that. And, and I haven't seen that happen. And the course of their life continues to be painful. And whenever they interact with my life, that makes my life painful. Because people who are wounded and people who are in pain are costly to everyone around them, right? We're costly to everyone around us when we're hurting and when we're in pain. And that's okay. We get to have other people spend on us, love on us, and help us find healing so that we're not walking around constantly needing to gather from other people's resources to get our peace. Remember we talked about our inner being is like a garden, and you have to cultivate that garden. And if you are giving away too much of your fruit and you haven't cultivated enough for yourself, you find yourself having none of your own. So there are times in our lives where we really literally need to be fruit from other people, from other places. But then we get strong enough to cultivate our own, right? Yay. And then we get to decide how it is that we give out our fruit. So I'd given out a lot of my fruit, and I was expecting that fruit to bear fruit. And I didn't see it bearing fruit. And that made me think we had missed an appointment. And so I was super frustrated, and I wasn't even aware of why I was frustrated. So it took me a little while and a little bit of self-awareness to even ask the Lord what I'm frustrated, what am I frustrated about? And he goes, here's what you're heartbroken because you thought this was going to happen. And I said, well, why what, right back to you, Ann, blame. Oh, we missed blame. But anyway, shame, yeah, I blame myself. I was like, what, if only I had done this better. And you know what's so cool? The Lord said to me this, he goes, and I'm literally dwelling with and in people all the time, telling them how magnificent they are, speaking to them, loving on them, and they still think that I'm super mad and ticked off and all worried about the things that they do wrong. So if they misunderstand me, how likely are people to misunderstand you? He goes, I communicate perfectly. And people don't understand or hear me accurately because they are hearing through the lens of their own hurt and pain. So I asked him, like, what's the deal? And he goes, they still get to choose. Just because you see what I'm wanting to do in someone's life doesn't mean that they don't still get to have a choice. And I thought, because I thought if I saw what God was doing in someone's life, like it was like for sure a thing that was going to happen. And for sure a thing that was going to happen in my life. And he goes, no, there's a million yeses between here and here. And so we get to have all these yeses with God, where he's bringing us into a healing journey so other people and ourselves and family members, we get to continually be in this wonderful place. And it truly is a joyful journey. Because getting healed isn't hard. I know that there's a saying out there that says no pain, no gain, but I'm going to just tell you that's baloney. It's not hard to get healed. It's super hard not getting healed. The only pain we experience is when we continue to refuse to delve into this and let the Lord bring us healing. So we're gonna practice. Oh gosh, I went over. I didn't realize, I looked at the clock and then I went over. So we will do this. We'll go quick. We have about 10 minutes. We're just going to let the Holy Spirit speak to us. I would like for us to